Hello, Kate. Good to see you.
Hello, so good to be here with you.
Let me first introduce Kate, who is an aspiring, thriving leader and co-creator of experiences that foster thriving for others. And Kate and I met through our shared involvement with Transformational Travel Council and have a shared passion for course creation and growing and learning and development.
I'm excited to have this conversation and see what arises. We have a lot of, as you said, Elizabeth, a lot of shared interests, and we have gone down a lot of paths together, and I think there's many more to come.
I always love knowing a little bit of people's backstory, and I also want the audience to kind of get to know a little bit more about you, Kate. And I know you've had a nonlinear career journey, as I can relate.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this the other day. It's been almost 20 years now in the spa or wellness space, if you will. And it started by answering a newspaper ad in college. Honestly, a spa receptionist job sounded much better than waitressing. And so I was like, oh, that sounds so much better. Maybe I can just like sit there and I'll answer phones. It sounds great. And turns out I loved it. And it was just this small, several room. They were in like an old dentist's office. So it wasn't anything fancy, but I got what I know now is I had the opportunity to see the moments and experiences that can really transform someone's day or life. And, you know, in spa, it can sometimes be more relaxation focused, which we had those clients or couples who would come in and want to share a new experience with each other and creating that for them and helping guide them through what is spa. And those who come on a regular basis to really work on some sort of physical ailment or just maybe enhancement or more mobility and or a physical, so facials or body work. And it after a while of working there, it really shifted everything. And I went back to my career advisor at the time and I was like, where do you go to school to do this? Like, is this a real job? Can I do this for a living? And the answer was yes. And so I moved back to Houston and went to the Conrad Hilton Hotel and Restaurant Management School at the University of Houston. They were just starting a spa focus at that college. And so I was one of the first to kind of go through that. We ended up creating a local student chapter of a Houston Spa Association so that we as students could meet with leaders in the community who were managing spas and kind of forwarding this then still a pretty kind of new industry, in especially rising importance within the hospitality sector. And so that kind of started my path. In 2010, I was awarded a scholarship, the Mary Tabaki Scholarship by the International Spa Foundation Association. And that really also was a career point because I got to meet people that were literally in my books. Like it was a pretty nerve-wracking experience actually going to DC and like going to this conference with all these professionals. And I'm like, I've read about you in my books. But that opened a lot of doors for me and really set me on a path towards becoming part of this community where our roles as individuals and leaders was to create environments where others could be well and gain relaxation, enjoyment, better health. And that kind of really has been a driver of my growth and career since then. And I've always kind of stayed in that, whether that was through eventually events. I worked on a project it was called the Buzz Bus, and we traveled around the country in an Airstream trailer promoting wellness and tapping into the local opportunities that people had to be well and in all the ways that could mean. Working in hotel spas. I worked for the Global Wellness Summit and their sister nonprofit, the Global Wellness Institute, and was really exposed to the global landscape of what the wellness economy is and all the things that it touches. And that actually, through working with the Institute, is what led me to Renee Moorfield, who owns WisdomWorks. She's the CEO and founder. And we got to work on a project there called the Wellness Moonshot, a world free of preventable disease. And it was really an initiative to galvanize those within the global wellness economy around addressing preventable diseases and what could we use in our services, our programming, our expertise to really support people and help them take action before it got to the disease point. And so we got to collaborate on that, and I just got to experience her approach to growth and leadership in general, and that really attracted me. And so when I transitioned away from working with the Institute, I got the opportunity to join her team and have been there since 2020. And I'm looking forward to a long future with her and helping leaders really transform how we view leadership. And I think that's one of the things that has really stuck with me about the work that we get to do is previously in all these jobs, there was a way of working, and I think it's still the dominant way of working in this push ourselves till we exhaust ourselves and then recycle and rinse, repeat. You know, it's like just push, push, push to get something out or get something produced or create even a enjoyable, relaxing experience for someone else and push yourself to create that and then do it all over again. And for me, there was a disconnect. There was some sort of disconnect between how we were working to deliver such impactful services that wasn't translating to how we were working. And I thought there had to be a better way. For a long time, I thought I was like crazy, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm just naive and this isn't the way the world works. And then I found someone who really walks that talk and really believes and tries to steward the conditions where everyone can thrive, including ourselves. And that is what our work at WisdomWorks is all about, is helping leaders steward the conditions where everyone thrives, including themselves. And how to make that practical, because it's a really great, lofty goal. And I think we can all talk about it. And how do we, do that on a daily basis? And that's the work that we get to do, is how do I make that practical? How do I take all this science and this learning and development and growth opportunities and make it practical on a day-to-day in how I really work, how I show up at work each day. And I have grown so much from that whole process. And there's a lot of other pathways, like you said, nonlinear. There's a lot of other avenues I took along that, but I would say that's the common thread throughout my career journey.
I think you balance this like idealism and pragmatism really well. And I have worked in the leadership development industry myself and have at times walked away with a feeling of disenchantment because I feel like it's a lot of ideas that sound good on paper. And then the ability to operationalize those and really embed them into the culture where people know actually what to do in order to like live up to those ideals misses the mark. It's like exceedingly not practical. And it's not, people have a hard time knowing how to like, what am I supposed to actually do? And so I feel like you're somebody who is also like substance and impact in addition to kind of the ideas. And I feel like that's such a rare blend. People are usually like, oh, I have a lot of great ideas, but I have no idea how to operationalize them. Or people are like really good at operationalizing things, but like can't really think strategically or big picture or in that kind of like, what are we actually trying to achieve, like, or to what end? So I think you have a unique ability to kind of like straddle those worlds. And I think that that's really cool that you see that in WisdomWorks, and it's why you're drawn to their work.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. And it is something I've learned about myself, though, in that I would say I tend towards the practical, like the operational side. That's my sweet spot. That's where I love to be. And some part of my role will always be executing something on a to-do list. I have to have them. And yet what I've tried to find before without knowing it, just kind of unconsciously, but now more intentionally trying to find those with those big ideas, because that is, I am not the person that will come up with the new thing. That's not my role, and my, like, where I find joy. You give me a blank sheet of paper and I am out of my element. I am like, what do you want me to do? Please give me instructions. Is there a prompt? Am I supposed to, I have lots of questions. And so I like to find those people who have those big ideas, because we need them. We need them to push us forward and help us think differently and give us something to strive towards, and inspire us. And so having, that understanding, I've been drawn to originally, I think, and now intentionally find those people who can think bigger and really think at the edge of what's possible and what could emerge from what we're doing and what a new world could look like. And then I like to get into the nitty gritty. It's like, I want to be really inspired and I want to work with those people to then bring it down into the practical. So, okay, now how do I move from where I am into whatever this idea you have that I like and I want to move towards?
Yeah. Well, and I know, speaking of which, one of the people you've been, or I guess, lines of thought you've been most drawn to in the recent years has been this regenerative leadership concept. So I know you got to take a course for that in the last year. Then that's been really a big part of, what's continuing to shape your understanding of leadership. And I'm curious how you're thinking about weaving that into the work that you want to do through WisdomWorks, if there's anything you want to share.
Yeah, so in the end of 2023, I think I was exposed to the book Regenerative Leadership by Giles Hutchinson and Laura Storm, and found out that they also now have a program, or Laura does, to really help you, again, make the framework that they present practical in your life. And I was initially drawn to, in the conversations we have around thriving, it's very similar to regenerative. I think you could, in some ways, use them interchangeably, but they also have their own paths and their own aspects, if you will. And so I was wanting to kind of go deeper in some way. At the end of 2023, I was really looking for a way to expand my own leadership understanding, definition of leadership, really strengthen that muscle for myself. And I was really drawn to that program for two reasons. One, because of this strong regenerative framework, in that it's about how do we not only restore or sustain what we're doing, but regenerate enough so that those coming behind us can benefit and continue to work with this land and this world that we're in, and that we leave it better, hopefully, than we found it. And so I was initially drawn for that, but then also how they structure the course is around the seasons. And so you have different energies and different ways of being together, both online and virtually together in live sessions. And I really enjoyed the intentionality behind the structure. So that, for these 3 months, we were going through a wintering phase where it was really about deepening our understanding of ourselves, the self, kind of doing some of the inner work, allowing things to rest and not needing a fast pace. Then you get into the spring, which is more energizing and a little bit faster paced, and we're learning new things and, gaining new knowledge. And then into fall, where we're kind of, okay, now how do you apply these? How do I digest these? How do I make something and harvest all of this that I've just learned and sat with, and then do something with it? And then moving back into kind of this winter phase, but in a different way this time, of, okay, now we've gone through together for these past 9 months. Now, how do we reintegrate that and go back into winter and see what we've learned to then prepare for the next kind of spring? And so I really appreciated a new way for me personally of working, and really embracing what outside, the external kind of nature is inspiring us to do, and working with that, maybe instead of against it, as I had personally been doing before, being very driven and wanting to go, go, go all the time. And I really learned, I think one of the biggest learnings is that the going along with not only the seasonal, but just kind of our energetic, how our energies change, and working with the energies both around us. So how things are moving and working with that, and also being cognizant of what our internal kind of rhythm is, and kind of working with it instead of against it and needing it to do something different, or be different in a moment, and trying to work with it. And I think that was a big learning for me that I'll definitely take into, the frameworks are very helpful. I think a lot of what we do at WisdomWorks is very similar work. We have a different language, a different path, if you will, or application, but we are speaking the same language. We want the same things. Our outcomes, our intentions are the same for where we're going. And so it was just helpful to kind of expand that framework for myself, and deepen that knowledge, and then kind of integrate that. And so how it's applying now is, as we think through the programs that we create, the experiences that we create for our clients and the leaders that we work with, how can I bring in some of that kind of cyclical or energetic kind of rhythms that Renee has talked about and known before, but now I feel like I have a lived experience of what that means in order to be able to better create it for those that we serve.
Yeah, which I think ties back to, you were kind of saying this wellness theme in your whole career, right? And as we, more and more, I feel like there's just that culture of burnout that just is, like you said, like, is there another way, and it is really hard in our current way the work is designed, where it's like, often when we are in a corporate structure, we can't honor our natural cycles, or kind of like the ebbs and flows, it's kind of like, be productive from 9 to 5 versus kind of like, follow the cycles of the year. And like, if it's winter, which sometimes that happens, obviously this time of year is December, and some people are kind of gearing down. Some people, it's like a crazy time where they're trying to get things done before the end of the year. But we're in a moment where people are reaching, I feel like, more and more for these wellness experiences in order to soothe themselves and, manage their anxiety. But there is like a root issue around like the way we're living, and the way that we're working, that is kind of at the heart of that is kind of more the systemic kind of challenge that I'm glad you're thinking about. How does the work you do at WisdomWorks continue to create cultures that don't yield burnout in that way, right? That allow people to thrive, allow businesses to sustain themselves, right? And not kind of have these like, in the world of business, we have that kind of mindset as well, just like go, 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 but at what cost?
At what cost? And because there is a cost. We're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
There is a cost to how we've been working, and it shows up in a lot of different ways. And I have believed for a long time, there has to be a better way. There just has to be a better way than this. And I'm glad I never lost faith. I lost it a little bit. But I'm glad it stayed with me. And because in some ways, I think it made me more curious and more open to those that were trying to find that way. Led me to Renee, led me to doing this regenerative leadership course and the other kind of avenues I've sought out. Again, not always intentionally, more because I felt drawn to them, because I just knew like there has to be a different way. Who else is doing this? I have to find it. And I think, when you were speaking, one of the other things that came to mind was also, one of the things that I got out of this regenerative leadership course is a better understanding of how we got where we are. And for me, that's really important, because I don't want to say that the way that we're working isn't working in a way that implies judgment that we shouldn't be where we are. Because what I learned in the breadth of history that they give you in that course, as well as, and they pull from different leaders in different industries, is that it's really not surprising to me that we are where we are. It seems like a natural outcome of things that happened. And this is our response to a culture that has evolved into one that demands of us often a way of working that really isn't sustainable. And our first kind of, as I was just listening to another podcast on our narrative around progress and trying to find another narrative, a more holistic narrative around progress, and that it doesn't always mean advancement. And to better have a holistic picture of what our progress has actually done, and both the pros and the cons, and what potentially unintended negative consequences have come out of that progress. We're all naturally judgmental. It's a part of all of us. It's part of humans that we need to judge things in order to then know if they're safe or not, or how we should respond. And I have the opportunity now to question those judgments, to question or maybe pause judgment. And I think what a lot of understanding how we got where we are has enabled me to have more compassion to, I see a different path forward, but I'm not in to tell you what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is a natural response to what our world has demanded of you, or inspired you to do, even, there's a lot of narratives around this is what success looks like. And so it's not surprising to me that we are where we are in some ways, and gives me hope that, okay, if there's some reasoning as to why we got here, there can be some reasoning as to changing that path forward. And that's kind of that rub, and that's where we get to work, is like that. Okay, I do know something's different. I don't know how to get there yet. Like, is there some help? And that's where we get to play, which is often demanding in and of itself. So I have over the past couple years had a reflective process, and I tend to do new ones each year, just kind of new flavors of what questions will I ask myself this year. I found the year compass. And so that's the one I did from 2023 to 2024. And, it had me reflect back, and what 2023 brought me, I think, was a lot of gratitude for the relationships that I was building. I had a lot of quality time with those around me, and really we've been in our current house for about just over 3 years. And so I was spending time trying to get to know my neighbors, or, make friends in this area, which as an adult, I don't know if anyone has the answer on how to make friends easy as an adult without kids. Please let me know. Please reach out, because it's kind of hard. Dogs help, though, I will say. Once you have a friendly dog, that really helps. And so I was really feeling grateful. And one of the things that I was moving into was, how can I strengthen these so I really feel that I have a community here, feel connected to my local area? And also, I had learned this term, unforgetting. And that was kind of my word for going into 2024 was, I liked how it was different than remembering. Remembering in some ways, for me personally, had this feeling that I should already know this. And so I have to go and remember it. It was for some reason, that's the connotation it held. And unforgetting felt much lighter, much freer, that okay, there's some things that my body, my culture, my society knows, but has forgotten, and for all sorts of reasons. And so it kind of, I don't know, it felt easier. I don't know. And so that's kind of how I was going into the year. And what that inspired was joining the regenerative leadership course, but also being curious about my own lived experience, being curious about what else is out there that I might have lost touch with, that I may have forgotten generations ago, if you want to go into the ethereal kind of area here. And So I really wanted to do that in order to kind of really own my voice, own my own sense of wisdom. I was learning a lot and had felt often as the youngest person in the room. So my voice, I had to take a back seat, and I was really questioning whether that was still true. I was starting to question, like, okay, but do I know some things? What is it I know? What is it that I know? I'm a naturally curious person, so finding new things and new perspectives and learning and growing will never end. It would be harder for me to not do those things. um, and yet there's a lot that I've already learned, and to kind of own that um, for myself internally felt really important. And so I think that's kind of the start of the year, is where I was going. And then early in the year, in March, my nephew was born, and oh my gosh, I love being an aunt. It's the best experience ever. And it's brought so much joy. Like, there was just so much joy at the beginning of the year, in that first quarter. Even though my sister's story and process had some complications, there was still such joy and such my experience of her experience. My experience of her during this was, there was just a sense of doing the next right thing. There wasn't a lot of extra. It was, this is what we need to do to take care of my health and my baby's health. And we just did the next thing. And everyone kind of pulled together and came together to support her family and my nephew. And it was an incredible moment of the year, that showed me also the new generation that's coming. And it's just so fun to watch them grow.
Yeah, it sounds like that even surprised you about how much you enjoyed it. I don't know, enjoyed that kind of experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was always excited. I've always known, I have 3 younger siblings, and they have always wanted children. And so I always knew that this was going to be a part of my life, but now it's reality. I have the actual experience of being able to do it, not just the idea of what it might look like or feel like. And it's just such a gift to be invited in, because I was also invited in by my sister and my brother-in-law to be a strong figure in this child's life. And, when I went, due to what happened, it was primarily myself and my brother-in-law that were taking care of the baby for a few days. And so I got some really close bonding time with my nephew, that I wouldn't have wished for due to the circumstances as to why it happened. And I'm grateful that he and I got some really, really good bonding moments early on in his life.
And okay, so that was your spring. Did we have any kind of where was there a point of conflict in the course of the year where maybe you were, if there was one, where you were kind of forced to make a choice, or kind of put in a difficult position where it kind of revealed maybe a little bit of I had to make a decision in line with my values, or I don't know. Did anything come up related to that?
Yeah. I'm not sure I would say it was a conflict. My husband and I had been asking ourselves the question of whether we want to grow our family and have kids for a long time. And I won't say it was a conflict. We were still just in conversation. And I was asking myself the question of what would it be like to be a mother, especially in our culture in the US, of what that means and the way my identity would change, and the things that would be assumed of me as a mother, and the implications of that. The implications of also being someone who works from home, and then inviting a child into that, and the dynamics that play. And I have many friends who, struggle with that, succeed at that, live within that reality. And so I won't say it was a conflict, but it was a question. It was a question that I was holding in about halfway through the year. I went on a silent retreat, my first silent retreat. I said yes without knowing what I was saying yes to, by the way. It's a great way to do, it's a great way to put yourself out there in uncomfortable situations, is just say yes before you really understand what you're committing to. Highly recommend it in some ways. And my sister and I were looking for an opportunity to just kind of a different way to bond. And we saw this workshop and we were like, cool, let's do it. And then we realized it was a silent retreat after booking it. And I was apprehensive. I was apprehensive that I could really do it. I am someone who loves to talk, and I talk to myself out loud a lot to my dog, because again, I work from home by myself. So who else am I going to talk to? And so I was really worried that I would have a very hard time. And I was pleasantly surprised as to how much I enjoyed it. And there are two things that came out of that experience. One is, I think it was the first time in my life where I did not feel responsible for another human being besides myself. I didn't know that wasn't an experience that I didn't know what I didn't know. I can intellectually know how to not take care of others. But it's also my default. It came out of my childhood, and also probably part of just who I am naturally. And I've always felt this responsibility for those around me. And when I went to that retreat, one of the first things I realized was like, oh my God, I'm not responsible for anything. I'm not even responsible for making eye contact with someone. Like, I don't have to do anything. I can be with other people, and I am not responsible for anyone but myself. And it was such a release. It was, I've never felt freer in my life. And so that provided me a lived experience of what it would feel like to be free of responsibility and to be able to give in a way that I had not really been able to do before, not as fully. And I think that also then opened up a shift in how I viewed parenthood, how I viewed potentially becoming a mother, of a way of being responsible and loving to another human being without it becoming who I am, or all of who I am, if you will. It becomes an aspect of who I am. And so the shift that came out of that was now, not immediately, but within a few months, honestly, it was a huge shift internally of like, okay, I think this might be something I want to try. And see if we're meant to be parents. We've now started that journey from, all the things that led up to that silent retreat, but it was a catalyst for a different way of being, a different way of understanding my sense of responsibility, a different way of feeling my sense of responsibility for myself and others. That was a big moment, looking back, into the year, and how much it shifted, and just giving me access to the felt of experience of not being responsible, not the expectation of being responsible for others that I did not have access to before. Again, I intellectually understood it, had it all up here. I've been in therapy, highly recommend therapy for everyone, really, like at some time in your life. Anyways, that's a whole nother conversation we could go on. But so I intellectually understood it, but I'm not sure that I ever fully embodied or knew what it felt like until silent retreat.
Yeah.
That's powerful. I do feel like that is, so it sounds like maybe more silent retreats in 2025.
Oh, now I want one every year. Oh my gosh. Yes. Like, no way. Like, now it's like my happy place. Oh yeah. that whole week I was there for 7 days too. Like we didn't like, her and I jumped 2 feet, like full in, just like dove into the deep end, without knowing anything of what we were getting into. And it was much easier than I thought and so enjoyable. Yeah. I highly recommend. We went to Vallecitos. It's in northern New Mexico, and you're surrounded by a national forest. Just you and the staff. Everything is quiet. Like I don't think experienced silence in the way that I did while I was there, because all staff is quiet. Like everyone on property is also in silence.
Yeah.
Which just creates a whole different experience of being in nature, really, and with other humans. So yeah, highly recommend.
So that sounds like, a big question that is kind of in the process of getting resolved, but you're, like making that decision. And where are you landing kind of towards, you've had kind of these influential experiences over the year. Where are you landing as we finish 2024? And do you feel like you have any core messages or lessons that you feel called to carry forward in 2025?
Yeah, I think the biggest one would be the one we just talked about, continuing to kind of play with, I've been in some programs, and one of the phrases that they use is an overdeveloped sense of responsibility.
Yeah.
And that has always, I am like easily identifiable. Yes, 100% can show up, and I can come up with numerous ways that has showed up in my life. And so I think one of the things that I'm bringing with me that I hope stays with me from that silent retreat is a different way to think about that, a different way to think about the sense of responsibility that I have for myself, for others, for the world, for my community, and having some more nuance with that, having some more lightness or play. I just shared on LinkedIn the other day, a question that someone offered me one time was, can you do it for fun and for free? For fun, meaning that sense of lightness, that sense of playfulness with it. And for free being that I don't have expectations of what the outcome will be of taking this, what I deem as a responsibility, and letting go of that. And I'm not great at either of those yet, but it's a question that stays with me. I don't know. It's a progress, it's a journey. And what else am I taking forward? I think I start my reflection time usually during Thanksgiving, because it's like the quietest time in my house. And going into this year, the word that keeps coming into mind is rooted. So how can I deepen or strengthen the foundation that I've started to build? How can I deepen the roots and this knowing of my voice or my understanding of myself or what I've already learned? How can I deepen into that? How can I deepen the connections with those that I'm in community with? So my neighborhood or those in my external network, like how can I deepen those roots so that they can withstand any, really any challenges that come, so that they can be strong enough that I can sway, kind of like a tree. That's kind of what it makes me think of, is like, how can I strengthen my roots so that I can move with life in a stronger, more grounded way. And so that's kind of what I'm bringing with me, and one of the questions and intentions I have for 2025.
Yeah. Well, I think I can totally relate to the over responsibility thing. And I think it's such a beautiful, honestly, going to the place of burnout, I've often had many points of burnout in my career. And there's been really humbling moments where it's like, oh, nobody puts more pressure on me than I put on myself. I can't really blame it on my employer or my boss. And it is that over responsibility. I make the whole company's problems my own outside of just my role. And it's just
doing more than anyone ever asked you to do. Like, you asked me to do this thing. I've also done these other 4 that you didn't really ask, but I also thought that you needed. And I've just assumed, and I've done it. Yes.
Which is very, bosses love it. So
employee most days. Yeah.
But I hadn't thought about, and so I know that there's a way to like hold, and honestly, I think we're both in a place where we're feeling like we're called into a higher level of leadership I know you've just taken the COO position, and it's like, how can I assume a role of leadership from a place of like levity and not from this place of like feeling this huge burden of it. So I think that we can hold each other accountable in 2025 for not holding that mantle with such gravity. And
Yes,
also the motherhood thing that I also love, that it's like, can I also not carry that with such weight, and like realize that my level of how I relate to that decision is, I can hold it with like not so much seriousness, and not so much weight. So I'm appreciative to hear of where you're landing with that. And that this rootedness thing, like I do think trees have that ability to be both like grounded, but also flexible with, their branches in the wind. So I think they have a lot to teach us.
They do. And I do wonder, I shared this with you as we were prepping for this call, this sense of identity and what that, I think that's going to be one of my questions for 2025, especially stepping into this COO role, as you said, it is time. I am ready, and I'm nervous, and I'm not sure that my identity is caught up with that title yet. My sense of self is still like, but in a good way. I don't know. Hard to explain.
Yeah. Well, I think anytime where, we get promoted or we, get a new job or whatever, that imposter syndrome is just so part of the process, right? And it's like, but we know we've grown into other opportunities and we'll do it again, and those of us who are committed to growth, it's also both like, well, if I stayed in that other role, I would get bored and like kind of start to get frustrated. And like, there's no other choice than forward, but doesn't mean that it's not like, ugh.
Yeah, totally. And I have friends like you. I mean, that's what makes it possible, is that I have people in my life who can help me like think through these questions, process these questions, pull me forward when I might want to be like, oh no, that's just too big. And they're like, nah, you can do it. I got you. That we can walk this path together. That is one of the keys for me and my growth, is knowing that I'm not alone, and I'm not alone on these questions around motherhood or identity. There are others that are asking these questions, who are walking these paths, and who are willing to share with me and walk with me, and pick me up when I fall and or need support.
Okay, I'd love to suggest that we close with a card that has any final messages for the year. How does that feel?
Love it. Let's do it.
This is the Goddess Power deck that I think you're familiar with, because we've played with this before. But I love it because it has archetypes from all over the world. Both of us have a cross-cultural, global curiosity. And so what I'll do is wave my hand, and then you can tell me when to stop.
Stop. Ooh, what is it?
Ooh, okay. It's Kali. Have you ever heard of Kali?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. You are being invited by the Hindu goddess of liberation and revolution, Kali, to address the aspects in your own shadow nature have held you in your own shadow nature that have held you hostage to old ideas that no longer serve who you want to become. You can no longer define yourself by your victim's story and expect to succeed in life. There is a beauty in liberation that is deep, fierce, and courageous. It rises up from the willingness to break the chains of the past in order to transform into something new. You may be afraid to set boundaries with others, but the goddess Kali has come to lend you her daggers, for you must cut ties with the familiar ideas about life that have determined your place in the world up until now. Have you been holding back on shining in the world because you were too afraid of the reprisal or judgment of others? This helps no one. You must step into life authentic and glowing. Refuse to allow the potential judgment of others to affect you. Every day, claim your power to liberate yourself from caring what others think. You are asking for the wisdom to live and contribute, to do no harm, and to serve for the highest good of all. None of this matters.
even if you must tear down what has been built.
Mm.
Callie will help you whenever you need to be courageous, even when you are most afraid. Be fierce and loving and be willing to learn. Life will respond in miraculous ways.
Hmm. Well, that last part is totally true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
And
we were
already
just talking about the
We're
fear of
a whole conversation.
And even I think it's connected to this over responsibility thing of like, that's a role that you've played that no longer serves you anymore.